So throughout the Cultural Development and Behavioural Safety Programme, we use a tool for profiling behaviours. It's simply called Behavioural Vector Analysis. And the words Behavioural Vector Analysis explain themselves. We look at people's behaviours, then we examine these behaviours by looking at their intensity and direction against 8 core behavioural traits. But before we dive into profiling, let's just understand the pedigree behind the tool we use. Back in the 1940s, William Marsden was asked if he could support the United States Air Force in picking bomber crews for the B-17 bomber. Specifically, the belly bubble gunner was the most difficult role to place. He appeared to be so successful at choosing flight crews and getting the right people in the right places, or as we say nowadays, making sure we get square pegs in square holes. So a little earlier in the programme, we talked about influence in choice and style of engagement. We looked at policing, teaching, advising, mentoring and coaching. And what we can now start to consider is what style of behaviours deliver what style of influence. Because clearly there are different skills required to police well compared to coach well, and likewise to advise. So therefore we can use behavioural profiling for choosing great supervisors, great leaders, great managers, but also great coaches. And it'll help us understand when somebody's struggling in the role they're in, why they're struggling, because they may not fit behaviourally. They may have the skills, but their core behaviours don't support the style of role they're trying to deliver. So let's look at the structure of what a profile consists and how we can use it within the workplace. A BVA profile helps us understand reflection of self, so we get a self-image graph, how the individual behaves when they're at work, the mask they put on to make sure they deliver what they think they're required to do at work, and then finally an under pressure graph, how they behave when stuff hits the fan. So they're the first 3 core things that we get from a BVA profile. It also allows us to analyse and measure metrics for stress within the business, whether we've got high stress through squash graphs where people's behaviours are changing significantly because of levels of stress, what you call intermediate stress where their behaviours are changing but they're not actually suppressing or changing their behaviours significantly, and obviously individuals where there is no evidence of stress being present for them. We can use the BVA profile to do things like team dynamics, where we look at where the sparks fly within a team, where there's synergy within a team, and where there are gaps within a team. And then finally, we can also look at stressors and stresses. How others stress you and how you stress them. So how do we read a behavioural vector analysis feedback form? Well, simply it's 3 graphs, and the 3 graphs represent self-image, work behaviours and under pressure behaviours. Each graph breaks into 4 columns, split at the centre with a horizontal centre line. So as we're reading the graphs, we look at what is the vector that is highest above the centre line and what is the vector that is lowest below the centre line. So we always read the highest first, the dominant behaviour, and then the lowest second. This is the subdominant behaviour. There are 2 other available points we could read. They will always be indicators of behaviours, but not the primary driving force. So they're in there and we'll often use them to adjust the feedback, but fundamentally the highest and the lowest points on each graph are the strongest presenting behaviours for that individual. So let's look at the core behaviours first. Each graph has 4 initials on the top. They are D for drive, I for influence, S for steadiness, and C for compliance. So what we have as we read each graph is the opportunity to see a high and a low against each one of the 4 letters. So a highly driving person is likely to be forceful, assertive, decisive. They love making decisions and they like seeing the big picture. A high I person is likely to be influential, engaging, gregarious, outgoing. A high S person is likely to be very steady and logical and methodical. And a high C person, very compliant and rule bias. Low D people make great team players. They are unpretentious, approachable, accommodating and modest. Low I people are probing, serious and fact-based. Low S people are fast-paced, alert, active, restless. And low C people tend to be very persistent and forceful in achieving their goals and their decisions. So as you consider those 8 potential traits, that allows us to put the strongest above the line and the strongest below the line together to create a good understanding of what makes that person do the things they do. So a high driving person with a high level of influence will be driving and forceful, gregarious and outgoing. They're very motivational individuals. A high S and a high C creates somebody who's very steady, logical, methodical, often a perfectionist. A low D with a low I is accommodating, probing and serious. So a low S with a low C presents a set of behaviours which are fast-paced, alert, active, restless and very persistent and strong-willed in their decisions. So you can see, you can start to add together the traits to create combined traits and really truly understand the individual. So once we have an understanding of the self-image, the next thing to consider is how the person changes their behaviour to achieve more in the workplace. If their drive goes up in the workplace, it indicates they're trying to be more forceful and more decisive. If their drive goes down, they're tending to take their foot off the gas. They could probably do more, but aren't either being allowed to or aren't being comfortable they could. If their I goes up, they're being more influential, working with more people. If their I goes down, they're forcing themselves to be more fact-based, more serious. If their S goes up in the workplace, they're forcing themselves to be more steady and logical and methodical. If their S goes down, they're forcing themselves to get along with or work without any procedures to follow, so they're very much juggling lots of balls and making it up as they go along. If their C goes up, they're more rule bias, and in our industry that tends to be the case. People's C tends to go up because we're a regulated industry. And then finally, if their C goes down, they're forcing themselves to be more persistent and more strong-willed and sometimes challenge the rules in order to get a better result. So now we can consider the under pressure graph, and we can notice what changes when they are under pressure. If their D changes, they're being more forceful or more accommodating. If their I changes, they're being more influential or more probing and serious. If their S changes, they're being more steady and logical, trying to think outside the box more. And if their C changes, they're focused very much on applying the rules and following the rules, or breaking the rules, or at least coming up with some new ones. So having now completed behavioural profiles for a team, we can take the work mask graph and apply it onto a single piece of paper. And as we plot each graph, we can ask ourselves some simple questions, like what makes this person tick? Where is the synergy within the team? Where will the sparks fly? And as it is complete, are there any gaps in this team? We can finally then use this to look at how will we stress each other out and who will stress who in which way. High-performing teams are not all the same. High-performing teams understand how we get along, why am I different, and why does that person bounce off me and this person grate me. That enables each team to create a culture where we understand, we accommodate, and we work well together. That's the strength of doing team dynamics in our workplace. But the final thing we can use team dynamics for is how will the team be perceived by the outside world? So if this is a leadership team, how will their consistent decisions be perceived? But also we can use it for things like accident investigation, why or how somebody made a mistake, excellent investigation, why this team performs brilliantly when others with the same skills don't. We can look at it for conflict resolution, talent or succession planning, and finally, During recruiting, we can do a human job analysis approach where we say, what are the perfect behaviours for this type of role, and how does this person joining us fit those styles of behaviours? So the BVA as a process within the coaching program allows us to do lots of things, but one of the critical things we use it for is identifying great coaches. A great coach typically has a high I, they're a people person, a slightly lower D, so they're accommodating and they're great listeners, a close to the centerline S, so they can work fast-paced, alert, active, restless, but also consistent and steady with the same people. And then finally, a neutral C, so they're neither biased towards the rules or biased away from the rules. So fundamentally, it's about working with people, listening to people, and working in lots of different environments. So the profile of a coach is a great tool for selecting people that have great coaching skills. We also need to consider, though, their availability, how frequently we could take them out of the business and get them around the teams, their coverage, how mobile they are and how many people they can actually get to speak to on a daily basis, their longevity, their history, their role. Are they a manager and leader already? And does it fit naturally into their role? Now, you may choose as managers and leaders to pick the odd nutter, the odd character, the odd really strong leader or manager that could do with some coaching skills too. This will not preclude those kind of people being suggested for the event. But naturally, to get the best out of the event, we want to choose people that have a natural coaching style first, and then add the extras more as a bolt-on and an added value rather than the core of the course.